All right, at this time, we will call to order the City of Kenai Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for June 24th, 2020. Will you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
Pledge
of the
allegiance
United
to the
States of
flag of the
America
United States of
and
America,
to the republic
and
for
to the
which it
republic for
stands,
which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under God,
God, with liberty and
indivisible,
justice
with
for all.
liberty and justice.
Item A2, roll call, please.
Commission Chair Tweet,
Here.
Commissioner Springer,
Here.
Commissioner Halstead,
Here.
Commissioner McIntyre is absent, Vice Chair Fikes,
Here.
Commissioner Askin is absent, Commissioner Greenberg,
Here.
Commission Chair Tweet, you have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Item A3, agenda approval. Wishes of the commission. Vice Chair Fikes.
Yes, Chairman Twait, I make a motion that we accept the agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Halstead. Any objections? Oh, yeah, okay, so just so you guys are clear, there's only two of us here in the room, Vice Chair Fikes and myself, so we will lean heavily upon you guys at home, or wherever you might be. Okay, we'll move on to item A4, the consent agenda. Wishes of the commission.
I
Vice-
move we approve the consent agenda.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any objections? Seeing none, hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. Takes us down to item C, scheduled public comment. We have none. Item D, unscheduled public comment. Anyone wishing to speak from the public? If you'd like to come forward and state your name and address for the record. Yep.
That black is the microphone, and it is on. Okay. You can just stay on the side of the desk. Okay. Thank you. It will pick you up.
Okay, my name is Laura Siebert. I live at 3329 Beaver Loop in Kenai. And I live adjacent to the two gravel pits that are providing materials to the Beaver Loop and the Superior Highway projects. And we also own 10 acres between those two pits. That property includes two documented anadromous ponds that drain through the Cone pit, which is now the QAP pit, and into the Kenai River. We've been working with the borough biologist over the last couple of years to conserve and improve salmon habitat on our property. I'm here tonight for two reasons. One, because we have over the last year noticed violations of buffer rules and of the anadromous stream ordinance. Both of these in violation of the QAP 2019 agreement with the city. Also, and probably more importantly, I wanted to ask planning and zoning to consider requiring up-to-date site plans for all gravel pits, and to stop the practice of simply transferring old conditional use permits to new owners. Obviously, much has changed in the last 30, 40, or 50 years since the QAP permit was issued to the Cone family. I don't know what is in that original conditional use permit. When it was transferred last July, there were no public comments, and that would be because nearby property owners were not notified like we would have been with the new conditional use application. A notice in the back of the Clarion is not sufficient. Gravel pits, old and new, should have the same rules and requirements and the same opportunity for public comment. As to the violations, there are several. QAP immediately cleared and excavated right up to Cone Avenue, leaving no buffer, violating their agreement of PZ 2019-26. When we complained, the city did come out and order them to stop, but in the following days, they ignored that order. QAP was and might still be storing old asphalt in the pit, although they agreed not to store old construction materials in the pit, near the water table. We saw it, we reported it, but within a couple of days, the pile was gone because they buried it. The Borough Anadromous Water Ordinance has been violated in both pits. QAP agreed to abide by the Borough Anadromous ordinances in the document noted above, but they clear-cut vegetation along about a 100-yard section of the stream going through their property. They then built two roads across the stream without fish culverts. This is the same stream in which they installed a fish culvert downstream under Beaver Loop Road. Later, they backbladed the section of the stream, which has pretty much left it a trickle of water and some dirt. We notified the River Center about these violations, but nothing's happened yet. Great Northern Construction and the other gravel pit violated the same ordinance. Last summer, we saw them pumping pit water into our upper anadromous pond, overflowing it and flooding wetlands. The River Center did get that stopped the same day, but I don't know how long it had been going on or if it's happened again. I don't believe that the city and borough should rely on the neighborhood to notice and report these kinds of violations by gravel pit operators. These violations were or are in plain sight. Apparently, there needs to be more oversight or something that prevents operators from disregarding their own agreements with the city. And again, gravel pits that come back into use should not be allowed to simply transfer decades-old conditional use permits. It's true that the use of the property hasn't changed, but many other groups have, which the city needs to consider before completing agreements to restart these old pits. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we do that? I was just gonna say, can we, okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if we normally do that. So, yeah, let's see if anyone has any questions. Vice Chair Fikes?
Yeah, so just from my own understanding, can you give me some more information on where the location of your property is in relation to the pit?
Yes, we live, I don't know if you're familiar with the Beaver Loop, we live in the old Collier Homestead House, which was
Yes,
right between
okay.
Collier Avenue
Yes,
and
okay.
Plymouth Street. And we have 13 acres there and then 10 acres back behind the two pits. So we have
Okay.
property bordering both of the pits,
Okay,
the
so,
QAP and the Great Northern.
and you did not receive any kind of notification in the mail when it came up for renewal for transfer of ownership of the pit?
I don't believe that for a transfer of a conditional use permit, there is public notice given to nearby property owners.
I thought there was, but, okay. And then, did you have any feedback from hearing from the, you said you talked to the River Center, but did you get any feedback from the borough as far as the violations for the anadromous water?
No.
Oh.
We've mostly gone through the River Center, and actually Lucas Biker has worked with us a lot. And I think he made some kind of plan with QAP to mitigate the damage that they have done, but I don't know if Lucas has been gone a lot this summer, but nothing has been happening, and QAP
Huh.
they're leaving. They're currently
Packing up and leaving?
packing up and leaving. And by the way, leaving their batch plant there, which previously when they wanted to put batch plants on Beaver Loop, and this was back in probably the late 90s in the old Foster pit, there was a very contentious,
So when you say
Episode.
leaving their equipment, their batch, all the product is just out in the open and exposed,
their
or?
batch plant is there, which, as I understand it, batch plants require a conditional use permit to operate in a rural residential zoning. And maybe they're gonna take it down, and maybe the original conditional use permit permitted a batch plant? I don't know.
Not to my knowledge. I don't recall that being part of it.
The cone conditional use permit is probably, I don't know how old, decades.
And then
40
you had
40 years
another
old, probably.
issue with the other pit operator who was having similar troubles as QAP?
Well, just because one day we took a walk and they were just pumping pit water right into our pond, and we hadn't been out there in a week or so, and it was completely flooded. And, I mean, it's never been the same. It's still all mud, and the land is flooded, and we don't see little fish jumping in either of our ponds anymore, so.
Pit water, help me understand what I might,
I think
like
it's-
out of a truck kind of
No,
thing,
it's
backs
from
up and,
excavating, or they hit the water table.
Water
is
table,
very
yeah.
high there, so they hit water, and then they have to get rid of it in order to continue excavate.
oh, and so then they discharged it into your property. Interesting.
In an anadromous pond.
Yeah, with fish,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah,
Huh.
Cohoes and Dolly Vardens, and it's been documented.
Wow. Very sad.
All right, anybody else online have any questions?
No.
Commissioner Halsted?
None for me.
Commissioner Greenberg?
Yeah, I would have a question. If we were to, would we review the process of how a conditional use permit gets grandfathered in to address this? How would that go, how would we go about that?
I'm gonna pass that on to powers that be on that. I would assume would take some kind of a council maneuver of some kind, of have to redo the way we do things like that, or would that be a policy?
Chair Sway, if the commission wanted to change Kenai Municipal Code, you could recommend a change to city council. This particular permit, if they're found to be, that they aren't meeting the conditions of their permit, the commission could revoke it. I have been in contact with the River Center, and I know they're conducting a site visit in July, and so depending if they've fixed what they're supposed to from there.
Gotcha. Okay, anything else, Commissioner Greenberg?
Yeah, as far as the city knows, have they been meeting the conditions of the permit?
No.
No, it's a
No.
document that is, I read it, and they agreed to abide by the anadromous stream regulation. They agreed about buffers, and I'm not sure what else, but no. They don't appear to be doing that, but that's just. my
Yeah, I've
observation.
driven by there and it looks like you can kind of see right through. I don't see much of a buffer.
Oh, well, they did put up berms, and that is, I think they abided by that, but, this is a long Cone Avenue where they were supposed to leave I think it was a 150-foot buffer on their property, but they dug almost right up to, and Miss Appleby came right out and tried to stop it, and she did stop it, but for a while, and I don't know when they started digging again, but they did, so.
Well, I think we got a guy that can probably check a lot of boxes, that has all kinds of information that he might be able to help, if Councilman Naxted has anything to weigh in.
Well, I guess I got a couple of comments. You know, there's this permit that they have with the city, and you're right, you know, if it has to do with a buffer between properties and things like that. But when it comes to waters of the U.S., which includes salmon streams and all of that, and those laws, both of these projects, are state projects. I'm going to back up a little bit. They're state projects. The Beaver Loop is, and the other one, the state of Alaska requires a stormwater pollution prevention plan, which is not only for the project itself proper, but also where material is coming from and going to those pits. The state has some responsibility in making sure that those are being maintained and followed. So I'm just saying that, you know, you got a contractor that we're talking about, but actually, you know, in a lot of, it's a state project, the state is responsible also. And I would think that they would be held accountable. The DEC certainly has done that on the state and state projects where there's been violations on their projects, and fined the states, actually, because of things like that. And it sounds like some of what you're talking about are pretty gross violations, and they're documented, and some of the people that need to be looking at it at the River Center, it's in their regulations, not ours. We don't have an Andra Stream ordinance here in the city.
I realize that, but in that document, PZ 2019-26, they did agree to not just the city ordinances, but borough and I think state, and I'm not sure what else.
Yeah.
I don't recall the exact word. But.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'm being real helpful, but I guess the point is that it goes beyond just those two contractors. It's also who's paying them, which is who the state of Alaska to do the work, and where they take their material and where they take it from are part of that. SWEP.
So, I got a question for you on that. So who, is it typical that the state or the contractor should have somebody, an environmental engineer or somebody to do some kind of oversight on a regular basis, or is it kind of get lost in the translation there?
It could be that the state of Alaska actually does that, but I think they have a whole section in their in their contract on how these are supposed to be done, and each one of these all the components of the SWEP are supposed to be reviewed on some kind of a periodic basis, probably by all parties involved. The contractor may hire somebody, doing
Third party,
paperwork and we're doing this and watching the rain and all that and the amount of runoff and things like that, but the state actually has some responsibility to come out and look at it too. I was kind of hoping, because I had heard some of this before, like a month ago, that you're talking about, and it sounded like you were going through the proper steps, you know, through the river center and whatnot, and I was hoping that that would be taken care of. Some of the asphalt that may be in the Nedmer stream, that kind of stuff.
You know, the unfortunate part about that is, and it probably is, but just typical slow-moving government, it could be way too late. I mean, by the time it gets there. So is there what is the fastest, best way to get out there and with your picket signs? Or, I mean, how do you get it to somebody's attention to deal with it and take a look quickly? I mean, that's, I guess.
Conditional use was to follow the rules. It doesn't sound like they're following the rules.
So, I mean, I can totally understand the frustration there, because you know, if you're in violation, you go out there and you tell them to stop or change it, and they do, but then the day gets going along and pretty soon you're back to square one again. And if there's no real oversight, I mean, the state's oversight is to get the project done within the side rails to keep it, you know, where it needs to be, but it seems like it should be like a third party or somebody else's job to make sure that you're hitting all the environmental components along the way with it. I don't know. Just my
A lot of things don't happen quickly enough, and sometimes if there's litigation, it happens months and years afterwards. It just does.
So she came here tonight, brought it to our attention. What's our next step, or what's her next step? What do you? I mean, I can take it back to administration on this. I mean, what can we do? Because it sounds like maybe at the very least a look at the conditions of the conditional use being violated would be the simple. I mean, I guarantee if we went ahead and revoked it, we'd get their attention. But we don't want to revoke it if that's not the right answer either. So.
I don't know anything about the conditional use permit because it's old. I believe, I don't know, given to the Plum family, but lived there nearly 30 years, and I'm pretty sure it's
Yeah, I'm sure it's 40 years old at least, probably. But so when we do transfer it, we update some of the, like borough and state, it must meet borough and state codes. If that wasn't read into the language 40 years ago, we do update some of that information, correct?
Territory, yes, numerous conditions and an updated site plan was submitted at the time of the transfer. I did contact QAP and also the River Center. I'd like to wait for the River Center's site inspection, since they would, if they're still in violation of Borough Code, then they're not meeting their city stipulations of their permit. But anyway, the Ms. Sievert contacted me today, and so then I contacted QAP and the River Center. And I know there is a pending records request too, so I know we will be sending you the records.
my husband requested that today.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
I have a question.
okay, yeah.
What about, Ms. Appleby, the storage of materials or whatever, as far as when it came before the planning and zoning for transfer? I don't remember that being a part of it, do you?
Let's see.
2019-6.
Yeah, I don't know, it's PZ 2019-26, that's what I saw. Yeah, 26.
And just out of curiosity, are site operators allowed to bury or store material like that? Is that a norm or an accepted practice?
Well, a lot of those projects, again, I would say they import to fill in where they've done, where they've excavated. So I would assume burying things aren't necessarily a problem depending on what they are. Obviously, petroleum-based stuff might be a different issue, but, okay.
In section 2 of PZ 2019-26, it states, item number 3, the transferee will not store fill materials such as concrete and construction waste in or near areas with an exposed water table. And then 4, the transferee, oh, this might be a typo. The transferee will block fish passage between water areas if necessary, to avoid violating regulations pertaining to anadromous streams and fish habitat. Won't use jake breaks, ensure that a gate can be used, a vegetated buffer will be maintained. They will not extend the non-conformity of breached buffers. They'll file an annual report, meet with the city for on-site inspections when requested. And if there's a change in use then they would come back to the city. And the first one is that transferee must comply with all federal, state of Alaska, and local regulations.
I believe they specifically also agreed to abide by the borough and anadromous regulation.
I do think I do remember the language, just something about,
It may not have been in that section, but I thought I saw that somewhere. As for the asphalt that we saw, we have a picture of it. It's not in the water table, but it's pretty close to the stream where it flows kind of close to Beaver Loop before it goes under the fish culvert. I mean, I don't know how deep the pile was, but when we went back, it was buried a couple days later. And I haven't been over there because we've been caught on their camera and quite severely about keeping track of what's going over there. So I couldn't say right now what the status is.
Okay, well, it sounds like it's been made aware, definitely, and hopefully we can get an answer or get a direction to make sure we're following the rules.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very much.
Okay, we're gonna zip through a lot now. Item E, consideration of plats. F, public hearings. G, unfinished business is nothing in those categories, so it takes us to H, new business. H1 is application for a 4-year lease renewal of a city-owned land within the airport reserve described as Lot 4, Block 1, FBO subdivision, and located at 411 North Willow Street, submitted by CBD Alaska. Staff report.
Thank you, Chair Twait. So this, the lease applicant is CPD Alaska, which is Crowley, and they have fuel tanks at the airport. They originally submitted their application requesting a lease renewal for 45 years. Their lease will expire later this year. After reviewing their application, I noticed the date that they were going to invest in the property wasn't until 2024. And with the newly, I guess it's not new super new anymore, but the code for leases on the airport reserve, the term of the lease, so the number of years in the lease, is determined based on the useful life of improvements and the dollar value of the improvement. And so they couldn't count the dollar value they were planning to invest in 2024 because the improvements must be completed within 2 years. So for that reason, with the materials they submitted, I felt they qualified for a 4-year lease term. And then once they're closer to when they're going to invest in the property, then they could request an extension. So I recommend that the commission recommend approval of this lease renewal for 4 years to CPD Alaska, better known as Crowley.
All right, thank you. Can we get a motion, please? Vice Chair Fikes.
Yes, I make a motion that we accept the action approval for a 4-year lease renewal of city-owned land within the airport reserve.
Second?
Second, all right, any discussion? Anyone online?
No, this looks pretty straightforward. Looks good. I
All right.
appreciate the heads up on it.
All right, sounds good. Please call the roll.
Chair Twait,
Yes.
Commissioner Springer,
Yes.
Commissioner Halsted,
Yes?
Commissioner Fikes,
Yes.
Commissioner Greenberg.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, takes us to item I. Pending items, we have none. J, reports. J1, City Council, Councilman Henry Nexted.
Thank you very much. Council had their last regular meeting on June 17th, and I'll just go over some of what I think are the highlights. You've got it in your packet there. Under item D2, we enacted unanimously the rezoning map for that 5 or 10 acres along VIP that you guys looked at about a month ago. So that went through. We didn't have any public comment on it in person. There was a letter, mostly with concerns of future development, the subdivision or access and how that would look, but it wasn't really pertinent to the zone itself. But that's something that I think this commission will be probably paying attention to, I would imagine, when that does, or if it gets subdivided. We enacted unanimously appropriating some funds for the wastewater treatment facility, improving efficiencies down there. And we also enacted unanimously appropriating funds for the multi-purpose facility for an exhaust fan inside the building and some corrosion remediation. There's some corrosion building up in the steel up high, and that has to be remediated. And what part of the solution to that is also just keeping the air moving and creating putting some fans up there to handle that. We adopted unanimously a lease renewal for the UPS building. I think you looked at last time. We adopted unanimously renaming of the that wasn't unanimous. We renamed for the renaming of the Kenai Wildlife Viewing Platform at the end of Boat Ramp Road, whatever it is, down to the docks down there. Tar Box Wildlife Viewing Platform, the tar boxes. Ken Tarbox and his wife. Ken is a biologist, retired, and a bird guy, and takes people down there. And he also was quite instrumental in getting that platform installed and funding for it. That was brought forth by Mr. Malloy. We adopted unanimously authorizing an agreement for professional engineering services to begin for a new master plan for the wastewater treatment facility. It's been about 15 years since we had the last one, and this time we do another. Once you have a master plan in this place, then it's easier to get funds for some of those developments and improvements. Then we approved conversion of airport reserve lands. I think you looked at, let's see, Lot 2, Block 3, Block 5, General Aviation, Apron subdivision amended. Oh yeah, with SOAR Ministries, and approving a temporary development incentives. What they're doing, and this is on the property that's behind the what used to be the fabric store. Might see some digging going on. All the trees are gone. They're going to put a hanger in there, but the incentives are that some of those things like removing unusable excavation and backfilling and whatnot can be applied to kind of extend their lease period for when they actually start paying on it. So they have an estimate from an engineer and whatnot. So the city's working with them on that incentive. And then we authorize the city manager to execute an in-kind memorandum of understanding with the Department Army to begin design work on the bluff erosion project. So it's a memorandum of understanding. We can't quite start, but we're right on the verge where we can go start doing soils investigation and surveying and some other things. And there's a few items that need to be ironed out yet, but it's getting very close now, so we can get started with at least that phase of the project. We had reported before that we postponed before the recommendation to the Kenai Peninsula Borough regarding their ordinance for mail-in voting, and we had a resolution we postponed, and that was postponed indefinitely. The borough has since approved it, and it's been approved to begin after January 1st. I think the borough mayor is going to veto it, and everybody's counting votes, and they think it's probably going to be upheld, be enacted. So, but it's all kind of a wait and see what happens. So that kind of gets us down to the pending items where we had an ordinance for repealing and replacing our municipal code Title VI for elections to provide clarity, process improvements, increased voter accessibility, basically tying in with what the borough is doing. And that is still postponed for a work session that we had on June 18th, and where we went through the entire code. Actually, Jamie did for us, and I should have brought the binder. She had made this beautiful 3-ring binder with all the backup information, plus the code revisions and everything like that. And but you know, it's still kind of early in the game, and we're still waiting to see what the borough and the state are doing. So we'll keep you posted on what the city's doing as we move forward. That is the end of my report.
All right.
Does anybody with any questions?
Anyone have any questions?
I have extra binders if anyone wants one.
You have what?
Extra,
Binders if anyone wants one.
Oh, they're really nice.
sounds
Really
like
did a
it. I
good
probably
job.
want one now. Okay, anything, you're good?
I'm good.
All right. Online, any questions for Councilman Nackstead? Doesn't look
Nope.
like it. All right.
I might even have a
Nope.
question for you guys. You know, we heard Laura Sievert here this evening, and, you know, it kind of makes me wonder, we have requirements, or you have requirements in these permits, and if somebody violates them, usually it doesn't come to light until maybe at the end of the year, but, you know, what are the penalties? What can we do? You know, there's others, it's kind of complicated with all the other different agencies in there. And so it's one thing to tell people what the conditions are as they pass on. I think that probably would anyway, even if you had notified everybody. But what are the penalties other than revoking it? But that's after they've maybe exhausted the pit.
Ms. Appleby.
It's revoking the permit. That's the city's hammer of sorts. So there have been a couple other conditional use permits where if they're found in violation, those were sent at various times of year, but we can send a letter saying that they're not meeting the conditions of their permit, and if they don't fix it, then it would go before the Planning and Zoning Commission to revoke the permit. Our code does state that the permittee has a chance to remedy the violation, but that's basically is revoking the permit is the city's power of authority.
Yeah, probably ought to leave it at that, but you know, you can do that, but sometimes these pits are exhausted, and it seems like a financial penalty or something else could be be-
That's something that we brought up, and I don't remember which one it was. It was one of these Beaver Loop ones that Commissioner McIntyre kind of was like, boy, there should be some sort of money held in escrow or a bond or something that, is, because there is nothing, like you said, they could just pull out, and then what do you do? If they're gone, they're gone. And that was more, we were thinking more from a reclamation plan standpoint that, what is the remedy if they just, it's exhausted, they leave and they don't reclaim it. But I think that's definitely something would be an item to entertain a new procedure, or new policy as far as that goes. They're certainly pulling a lot of dollars worth of material out of there to set some money aside that gave some kind of surety down the line. Seems like it would be in order. Won't help this one at this point, and there's not that many new ones. I don't know how you go back in, and maybe as part of when you renew the conditional use, you can attach it at that point, but I don't know. But that's a good point. Are you watching, keeping track of our statues out here that nothing's happening to them? Is that your job, or?
Well, I wouldn't mind, we could get a few more, maybe the one from Juneau and one from Anchorage.
Yeah, we might get Captain
I'd
Cook
love to put
down.
him
Get
down
Captain
here.
Cook down here, maybe, huh? How about Balto? Is he in Anchorage, or is that he's somewhere else? He's in New York, I think, isn't it? Balto, the dog.
Seward, I think.
Well,
Seward.
William Seward is in Juneau. That's one controversial one.
Oh,
And then
right.
Captain Cook up in Anchorage.
Yeah,
Those are the only two I'm aware of.
we should lobby for those. Huh. All right, we'll move on to J2, Borough Planning. Vice Chair Fikes.
We have not met since last session.
Good for you guys. J3, Administration. Ms. Appleby.
I think I'm still on. Okay. Thank you, Chair Twait. So I wanted to follow up on the street name that was at our last meeting. So the commission had a resolution for the McClellan. I think it was the McClellan subdivision plat. And during the meeting, the name of Davidson Drive or Davidson Street was in question. And so we took an ad ease at the meeting, and I recommended that the commission change their resolution to go with street. So then the past few days I've been going back and forth with the borough, and there's conflicting documentation. So there's actually some that pointed to street that we pulled up during the meeting, and then there's also some that points to drive. We actually decided to go with Davidson Street. This is just by email with the 911 dispatch person at the borough. And so I plan to, the letter I usually send, I attach the resolution for the plat. But anyway, the condition that was added at the meeting is, I'm going to say in the letter that it, after email discussions following the meeting, the 911 dispatcher and I feel it should be drive. But there's both, so that's why during the meeting I could pull one thing that said in the city records they approved of street, and then there were just conflicting records. And since that's what it is on the previous plat, we decided to go with that. And I still need to follow up with Public Works on the street sign because I think the street sign says street currently. So anyway.
You sure?
Yes. Well, it's a bit of a mess, but anyway, yeah. Just report on that plat and the Davidson Street and Davidson Drive saga, but anyway, it should be Davidson Drive, not Davidson Street, as I said at the previous meeting. And that's due to conflicting documentation, but that's what we ironed out after looking at all of it. The city is coming to the end of the fiscal year, so we'll be starting a new one July 1st. And then the DipNet personal use fisheries starts on July 10th. So the city is making preparations for that. There's some additional recommendations for people to wear masks and stay 6 feet apart from members that are not of their own household if they're going to be interacting for 10 minutes or more.
Yeah, I wanna see how that's gonna work on the beach. Can you tell me that one? Cause I wanna be that dip netter that's got that 6-foot buffer.
Yeah, I can't tell you that, but we're doing as normal. The planning department, we usually send out the parking pass notices. It was nice to use the new logo on those, and then finalizing the brochures that are given out when people pay at the attendant check. Anyway, still moving full steam ahead with DipNet.
That's it? All right, any questions for Ms. Appleby? Anyone online? Turn around, Bob. Oh, hi, Bob.
Nope. No question.
No questions. All right, then we will move along. Additional public comment. Seeing no one in the audience, we'll move on to informational items, which I guess we have none. Next meeting, July 8th. Anyone requesting a excused absence at this time? Nobody. Okay, commissioners' comments and questions. Commissioner Halstead.
I do have a comment. I'm not quite sure if this is the appropriate format to try and bring this up. I have had many issues, and it kind of comes along with the public comment that came this at the beginning of the meeting. What do we do as far as I'm trying to figure out the right way to put this. So I know we've had issues in the past where we've had different things where there was follow-up, and I believe my understanding is that Ms. Appleby and Willie are the ones that wind up doing the enforcement on that. And is there a list? I know we get kind of a generalized list, but is there a list of the amount of those that we get in a month and what we've done to resolve it and how many cases are open? Because I personally, and I don't expect any kind of special treatment or anything being on the board, but I've had several requests put in my neighborhood that I've not seen resolved. So it kind of seems like I'm calling and leaving messages, and I'm not seeing any kind of actions taken on violations of, and maybe it's not something that is even, I'm rambling and I apologize, but I'm not seeing it, whether this is a zoning violation or what do you call it, a covenant violation, but just like junk vehicles and people on the street and trash in the front yards of houses, and I report these things all the time, but I don't see them getting resolved, and actually I see them getting worse. So is it a matter of we don't have the correct amount of enforcement, or are we getting overwhelmed, or I guess how is that process, and does it make sense what I'm asking?
Are you volunteering for a job?
Well, the problem that I have with the whole process is that we sit on a committee here and we make zoning changes and policy changes, but if they don't get enforced, what's the point of sitting on a board?
We got your question loud and clear. Ms. Appleby.
I can start adding back in. There's a mid-month report that I usually put in the city council packet. I know I had started putting it in here, but I haven't for the last few months. I can start putting that in here because that gives a good summary of code violations. And then I guess the only other response for right now I can give is sometimes it does take time because they have to send a letter and before we can find them because they get a chance to remedy it. But I can start putting that report back in. I think that might be useful, so then you can see the number that we've gotten over the last month.
Yeah, I think I've seen that in the past where there was a certain, but I don't know if that was a quarterly report, that when we saw it was quarterly.
Yeah, it seems like I remember them on a quarterly basis with building permits and things like that, but, you know, if we could do it once a month, I think it would be helpful, and it stays a little fresher in your mind, and, and if you, for instance, have known there was something submitted, you'd be able to see that it was happening a lot quicker than 3 months down the line when you get a report. So, yeah, if we could do that once a month, I think that would be helpful.
I will do that.
All right. Let's go to Commissioner Greenberg.
Yeah, in reference to what Ms. Sievert brought in, I think that, you know, because it was grandfathered in, the permit didn't have as many details as what a new permit would go through. And I think with that, it's going to be very difficult to, it's not held to the same level as what permit is nowadays. I don't know if that's something we need to review a little bit farther. If in the future something like this happens, where there is a new gravel pit, where it does change hands, and maybe we have to look at it meeting the criteria of what a gravel pit needs to meet today. That might be a little, that might help us to, because there might not even be any violations because the older permits are a little vaguer. But it seems like they're obviously doing some violations.
I agree. Good point. Commissioner Springer.
I don't have anything additional.
Very good. Vice Chair Fikes.
All good.
All right. Good to see you all, and I have nothing else. So with that being said, the meeting is adjourned.
Wahoo.